Greetings, traveler! I am SnapJelly, and I asked you guys on Facebook and Twitter if you wanted to know about dual wielding. And, well, everybody was, kind of mediocre about it. But anyway, here it is. So, dual wielding. What's the deal thing? Dual wielding has been a thing for ever, right? Everybody knows about the concept of wielding two weapons. It's a very popular thing in movies and video games and such. And thus people want to know, is it an actual thing? Can you actually dual wield? And many people will tell you, no. It's a movie trope, it's fake, makes no sense, and that is not true. Dual wielding was done, it can be done, but it can only be done in certain ways. Now, first, I want to say Miyamoto Musashi. Of course, because you can't make a dual wielding video without mentioning the great Miyamoto Musashi. He's a very famous dual wielder. In fact, I think that most people who know him only know him because of his dual wielding and nothing else. But that's beside the point. What I wanted to say is that he's usually portrayed or described to have one longer blade and one slightly shorter blade. And that's a very important detail, and I'm going to explain why in a second. But first I want to address what really is dual wielding. Like, how do you describe dual wielding? Because it makes an awful lot of sense in video games. As you equip your character, he would have one weapon in one hand and another weapon in another hand. But in real life, it doesn't really happen that you don't use your other arm actively. I mean, it happens in some cases, but like even when you consider shield usage, for example, unless you're in a formation, you are going to use your left arm very actively, right? If you're in a formation, then that doesn't apply, but any other way, like if it's a one-on-one battle and you have a shield, you are going to be constantly moving that shield around to try and benefit you and try and not benefit your opponent. So people don't consider using a shield dual wielding, but it actually is. I mean, what else would it be? You very actively use your right arm where you carry your weapon, and you very actively use your left arm where you carry your shield. So how would that not be dual wielding? If you think about it, it really also is dual wielding. And similarly, think about bucklers, for example. Now, personally, I don't really consider a buckler to be a shield. because of how small it is, and because you use it differently because of its size. I usually call a buckler like a burying tool, and I think I'm gonna say that a lot in this video, burying tool. Because that's really what it is. Like if you get an arrow rain and you would hold a buckler up, that's not gonna protect you in any way. Like the way you use a buckler is it's constantly moving, and you use it to either to lock your opponent's weapon in place, move it out of the way to create an opening for your primary weapon to attack with. So it's a parrying tool, and that's really the basics of dual wielding. You see, when people think about dual wielding, they'll think about, sword and another sword, or two maces, or whatever the heck, two weapons, and they keep in mind that you can block and attack with both sides. And yes, that's true, but still, when you are dual wielding, one of your tools, I should say, would be your primary parrying tool for defending, and the other one would be your primary attacking tool for attacking. You could do both, but you would really primarily choose one or the other. And that's important, because that is where the length thing that I had mentioned in the beginning comes from. You see, people think that if you have two swords, they will intertwine with each other, like the blades, they will collide with each other and yada yada yada. Well, yes and no. I mean, they don't have to, but they could in a way. But yeah, so that's the thing. You see, by making one of your blades shorter, by using one longer blade and one slightly shorter blade, you limit the chances of your blades colliding with each other. But that would also mean that you would use your shorter one primarily for defending. You could also, if you were to defend with your long one, step in closer and attack with your short one. Of course, it's a possibility, but you would primarily use that as a defensive tool. Now, something else you have to keep in mind. You see, some weapons are very accepting to, let's call it, help from other weapons, and other weapons are less accepting of help. When you think about, for example, an arming sword, like a medieval arming sword, something like this, right? You would have just one of that and nothing else, which is a very unlikely scenario, but let's say it happens, right? just one-handed sword, nothing else, you would constantly be using your left hand, even if there's nothing in your left hand. It's not like saber where you put it either behind your back or on your hip or something. You would either still grab the pommel and create the most leverage, or what you most likely would be doing is grapple. You would constantly grapple with your left hand because that's your strong suit. Your sword is relatively short, so you need to get in close. Right? That's your strong suit. You would use that because you have your left hand free. Now, if you would carry two arming swords, you would get rid of the entire grappling part. You see, that's the thing. Like with anything, with any individual weapon, in every individual style, there are upsides and downsides. Now, if you use two arming swords, you get as an upside, you can attack and block with both sides, yes. But you will get rid of the entire grappling portion of medieval combat, and that is a huge portion. So would it really be beneficial? It's up for debate, but in all honesty, I'm gonna have to say no, because grappling is a huge portion of medieval combat. So you would be better off just carrying one arming sword and just leaving your left hand open in order to be able to grapple. Likewise, long swords are not going to be too heavy for you to be able to swing them around with one hand. But using them with two hands is going to be way faster, way smoother, way easier. So you're carrying two, you could technically do it, but it's really not going to benefit you all that much. And other weapons like rapiers, for example, they are very accepting to help from other weapons, and as of such, rapiers are used with all kinds of things. But those other things that you would use alongside your rapier would be the primary parrying tool, right? You could use a buckler, but also a parrying dagger, like something like this, or with all kinds of shapes. You could even use it like a cloak, because cloth is fairly difficult to cut through, and if you use that effectively, you can use a cloak as a, drumroll, parrying tool, right? So, but rapiers, for example, were also dual-wielded simply by itself. Like, two rapiers were also used. And I can also vaguely remember, like, two side swords being used. I'm not too sure about that, though. But a side sword is kind of like a development of the medieval arming sword. They're a bit longer, a bit thinner, and they have a little bit more hand protection. And they are what eventually evolved into the rapier. And, like, side swords were dual-wielded, and rapiers were dual-wielded as well. Because the ways that you use these swords allow for you to use two of them, whilst the usage of other swords do not allow. Well, you could still, but you would limit yourself in an awful lot of ways. So you'd have to take into consideration, does carrying two of this weapon really benefit me? Because in a way, it gives you more options, but it would also take some options away, as it always does. No matter what you do, you'll get more options, but it also takes options away, right? You are going to have to get yourself a combination of tools or weapons or whatever that will give you more pluses than minuses, more pros than cons, right? And some weapons allow this and others don't. Some weapon combinations allow this and others don't. So rapiers allow for an awful lot of variation in terms of weaponry that support the rapier, and things like sabers, for example, don't, not as much at least. So dual wielding was done, it can be done, and in various ways, but not in every way. It's not as simple as, ooh, grab one weapon, ooh, grab another weapon, now I'm twice as good. That's not the case, because you use your left hand always. So, well, almost always. So, how do you know which weapons or which tools complement each other if you have no experience with fighting? Right? If you want to write a book or make a story or whatever, and you want to have dual wielding as a thing, and you want to keep it realistic in a way, then how do you make sure that the weapons your character uses work if you use two of them? Well, one thing that you can do is quite simply, and this is not foolproof, right? It's not 100% certain, because an awful lot of things happen in history that we know nothing about, that nothing is written about, an awful lot of civilizations we just have to guess about. We know they existed, kinda, but we're not sure, so it's not foolproof. It only really works from medieval to Renaissance period. But still, it gives you pretty solid basis, right? What you can do is go to Google Images and search it. It sounds stupid, but really, I haven't tried it, but I can assure you that if you type in rapier and dagger, that all kinds of pictures of historical manuals will pop up. right? It's proof that it happened historically, because it works. People tried it, and it apparently works because people wrote manuals about it. Likewise, if you type in rapier and cloak, pictures will show up. If you type in sword and buckler, pictures will show up, right? Because those things work, and people wrote down how you effectively use them. But if you type in like sword and staff, for example, nothing will show up. You would get possibly some modern people trying it out. You would get some modern art, maybe, like some fancy looking art. Gandalf might show up because he does that. But no historical manuals. And likewise, if you type in dual wielding rapiers, I can assure you that historical manuals pop up. If you type in dual wielding sabers, nothing will pop up. Because, well, that's just the thing. It wasn't done. So, well, Edward Kenway from Assassin's Creed might pop up. And like modern HEMA people might pop up trying it out, this thing. But if it was done around those times, it would have been written down. By the time that the saber popped up, things were written down continuously, and it would be very coincidental if we knew nothing about them, if nothing about it survived. So that's something that you can use as a basis. It's in all honesty, Google it and see if it pops up somewhere. And this is not perfect, but it gives you a solid basis. So there you go. Dual wielding. Was it done? Yes. Can it be done? Yes. Sometimes. Is it a movie trope? Also yes, because in movies, an awful lot of stuff happens that makes no sense. But whatever. So, that's my verdict. I should really start thinking about my outros before I do them, because this is going nowhere. Thank you for joining my quest, and I hope you'll join me in the next one. Bye, guys.